Welcome back. It feels like we just did this. We were listening to See-Through Panel, comic book discussion podcast. My name is Cole Harvey. I'm here with Fahed Rahman.
Hello, everyone.
Today, we are talking about two comics that were submitted to us. They are both just single issues. One's a little bit oversized. We're going to start with... Why don't you introduce them, Fahed, the first one here?
Again, so thank you to the creators for submitting these comics for review. So the first one is Wallbreakers by Jorge Zavalos, and this is a one-shot, and I'll just read out the blurb. In hot, noisy, ruthless New York is suffering one of its worst heat waves in history. An average Joe comes across a mysterious object of occult origin, accidentally unleashing an enemy of pure, unrelenting evil. There are many, and he's but one. Can he survive the hunt? Find out in Wallbreakers, a hard-hitting, non-stop action adventure from a one-shot comic from S2E Works publication. So this is available via S2EWorks.com, and Jorge submitted this to us via, I did a call out on Facebook, and he kindly submitted this to us for review. So what were your kind of initial thoughts?
So just broad strokes kind of stuff before we get into the nitty-gritty. I thought the art was fantastic. I think Jorge Zavalos is very skilled draftsman, and I'll get into it in a bit when we go through the plot a little bit, but I thought his perspective was really well done and very consistent, and he does some interesting angles with the panels. But the writing, I would say, is a little less spectacular than the art. It's a bit stiff and explainy, and then there was a few kind of jump cut, smash cut kind of things that I'll talk about. But overall, I think I quite enjoyed this, probably largely due to the art. I was very impressed by it for a submission.
I think this comic is absolutely gorgeous to look at. I love Jorge's art style. It kind of is very much a classical comic book, American comic book art style. I really loved the inking, the use of the lines, the cross-hatching to give depth and perspective. As you mentioned, kind of like he uses perspective and interesting angles to tell the story really well. I think it works exceptionally well when there's kind of action sequences going on, but he also, when there's interesting conversations going on between characters, I kind of especially like there's a few panels where he's focusing on a character's mouth and their reaction and counter reaction and all that sort of thing. I think I agree with you. The writing is the weaker part of the book, but I found this kind of a highly enjoyable romp overall. So should we kind of get into it a little bit more? So is the main protagonist unnamed? I don't think we ever actually formally introduced to him, are we?
I don't think any, because he doesn't have anyone that he knows on the page. Like, he doesn't talk to anyone who would know his name. So
So we start off. There's a bit of Basil exposition as Mark Mode and would describe it. So we've got, the first page is basically introducing us to this alternate future New York City where these like cameras are flying around and there's political upheaval, and we come across unnamed protagonist. He's in his apartment and there's this rag on his wall that he gets from an old guy. He says, why this old man on the subway was so eager to give me this old rag. And so there's a theory in storytelling, in writing, that you want to start the story as close to the end as possible, and just kind of like don't give too much kind of like backstory and exposition. I needed a little bit more information about the rag. Why would he accept the rag from this old guy? I just found that a little bit confusing. I didn't understand why some old guy on the subway. And if you did give me a rag, why would you kind of like put it up on your wall? So that I found that a little bit confusing. But it's you just kind of have to switch your brain off a little bit. So how did you kind of find those first 2 or 3 pages?
The first page I thought was super interesting, and I loved the art and the kind of city shots that he did, but it was kind of a show don't tell problem for me.
Yeah.
Where this guy, Jorge Zavalos, is doing the art and the story.
Yeah.
And so I don't think he needs to put as many words on here as he thinks he does.
Yeah.
His art speaks for itself, and probably some of the stuff you couldn't get through with the art, like the thing that technology has taken over the minds of the people, and they're kind of in a politically charged time. But I think that was repeated probably 4 different ways in the first few pages, and I get it. It just came off as a little bit stiff.
Yeah, I think the other problem, it kind of, especially on the first page, like maybe a third of the page is covered in text, which is such a bloody shame because he's such a good draftsman. You know, he draws buildings and people really, really well, and it's just we don't kind of need as much text on the page as he's put on there. So yeah.
One thing you said that really interested me was you said it has kind of a typical Western art style, which I kind of see like the black and white strip look.
Yeah.
But some of these shots, they look manga inspired to me. If you look on page 7 when the creature jumps out of the rag and it's our character's side profile shot, that looks almost manga inspired to me, just like the shadowed layout. Yeah.
Yeah. It's actually an interesting point. Is maybe I'm looking at the character designs and thinking it's a little bit more Western than it is, but there's definitely manga influences in there. I just looking at the first couple of pages, it very much reminded me of like reading those old Spider-Man comics from like the 1960s and 70s. So maybe that's why that kind of image stuck in my head. I love this. I think it's on page 2 where he's drinking from the can, the shading on the main protagonist's face. Just such a beautifully illustrated shot. It's like, wow, man.
That's really when you realize how much like work and skill is going into this art, because he doesn't have to shade every line on this guy's face, but it's clearly he loves doing this because he's spent. And then the next panel, he's got an equal amount of shading on his forearms.
Yes.
Like he's just drawing every little line. And the guy's drinking San Pellegrino, which is a top tier drink. Yeah. So I like this guy.
Yeah. I was kind of wondering about trademark problems with him drinking that kind of, but anyway, so yeah.
We won't tell anyone, Jorge.
Yeah. And then the inciting incident for the story is this monster bursting through the wall, and from there on in is a monster chase thing. These monsters, it's not fully explained whether they're extraterrestrial, whether they're supernatural. They burst from this wall, and that's kind of where I needed a little bit more information about why this was happening. You know, this is a one shot, so he just had this story in his head and he didn't want to think too much about kind of like the backstory and the lore of why these monsters were appearing. But I needed maybe a little bit more explanation about that, and the monsters are suitably horrific looking, unique looking as well. They're sort of like alien face grabbing monsters, I suppose, but from Ridley Scott's Alien movies, but kind of still quite unique looking as well.
I was just rereading the Incal by Mobius and Jodorowsky, and it's probably just this one shot. It is a couple times actually. I see some Mobius influence on the bug when it's leaping at the camera after it's broken through the wall. Yeah, that looks so much like, even the design, which this isn't a knock, I love the design. It looks a lot like a monster that's right in the beginning of the Incal, and like the way the shading is done with just the like repeated lines, it's not too crosshatchy. Yeah, it reminds me. He's got so many mixed art styles in here that it's really just a treat to look at. Yeah, but I agree. Yeah, it goes fast. Like I was talking about how he was showing not telling at the beginning, or he was telling not showing, but it switches after the wall break and it becomes a chase scene, like you said, and there's almost no meaningful text after that.
Yeah, there's no meaningful text there, and character development comes through the actions of the protagonist. He kind of comes off as this almost selfish Bruce Willis. Is that a word? Do you know what I mean? Kind of that Bruce Willis kind of everyman character, trying to get away from this monster. It's almost like Die Hard meets like Eldritch Horror. For some reason, he's got a samurai. Yes. Anyway,
I was going to mention that samurai sword.
Kind of this guy. I think he bears a striking resemblance to Jorge. So maybe Jorge's got a samurai sword. And I think the guy, the protagonist, is also an artist as well. So just maybe both of them have got like samurai swords in their apartment. But yeah, from that first encounter where he barely manages to survive, it's just kind of a chase scene, him trying to maybe get out of the city, get away from these monsters.
Yeah, that was. I had a problem with not just the katana in his room, but the scene when he jumps out the window, and then we just cut to him running on the street. I think that's like a third floor window, and he just like action hero jumped out of it. I want to know what happened when he hit the ground.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, and it's that sequence. He kind of like burst out the window. We see from his perspective, that's at least a 2-story drop that he's coming down on, and must land on the floor without breaking his ankles. And then like the last panel on the page is hundreds and thousands of these monsters kind of like emerging from his apartment window. So yes, I would be, maybe he's a parkour guy, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
But yeah, he kind of just lands on his feet and starts running away from these monsters and seeking help. But yeah, some of these panels are so good looking, man. It's beautifully rendered.
They're so well done. It was a treat to look at.
I don't know if he was working with an editor on this, or kind of what the turnaround time for it was. I wish just tightened up on some of these elements a little bit more, so I could give it I would still recommend you kind of like buying this and checking it out just for the art in itself. But it's just one of those things that it could have been a lot better. It could have been a lot better if he changed kind of a few things. Mm-hmm. Now, the next section is probably my favorite section in the book, which is where he basically steals a car from this old rich guy.
and his like gold digging wife.
Like, it's so funny. I found it kind of like hilarious.
That part I thought was fun because the whole thing's kind of over the top, right?
Yeah.
Like it's action movie. You were right about the Bruce Willis thing, and he just the guy's talking about how he's got this gold digging wife in the passenger seat. He's like, all my friends said you were in it for the money, but you really changed my life and I love you. She's like, yeah, sure. And then our main character just pulls the guy out the window and throws him and then steals the car. It was a lot. It was very fun though.
You can kind of tell he's a really skilled artist just from the way that he draws buildings really well. He draws cars really well. He draws people really well, and he's got a great range of kind of like capturing people's emotions.
Yeah.
Too. So yeah, just the range of shot selections, perspectives, all really like this section where kind of he's driving down through the street, man, in like the Mercedes Benz. Like wow,
all really, the speed really lines.
Yeah.
He's got a very good eye for action. Like this stuff reads so quickly and it draws your eye to the next panel just right. Yeah. I mean, he is. He can do whatever he wants. He's a good writer, and I'm sure he'll get better as he goes. Yeah. But if this guy was to work with a writer who writes for a living, and he would draw for him, I bet he could really make a name for himself.
Yeah,
doing that.
Absolutely. I would go so far as to say he's maybe one of the best artists we've featured as like one of the independent creators that we've had. On the show. Yeah, he's really far and away, really high up there as well. So let's not get too much kind of into the rest of the plot because we'll let you kind of discover that. But I don't know. It's the writing is a little bit ropey at points. It's a little bit stiff. There's a rule in writing where it shouldn't be and then this happened and then this happened and then this happened. It should be because A did this was the result, and as a result of that he had to react to it this way. And I felt he went from kind of like one action set piece to the other without really considering the emotional impact and all that sort of stuff. And it gets a little bit wordy towards the end as well, where he's covering up a lot of the page with unnecessary text. It's one of those things. Maybe this is his first comic book, which as a debut effort is absolutely superb.
Yeah, I don't know if it's his first, but if it's his first, this is insane. Like he's just been honing his skills for a long time, I would imagine.
Yeah. For me, this is recommend. Go over to what is the name of the website?
SnowyLocks.com. No, that's the other guy.
Yes, the other guy. SnowyWorks. SnowyWorks.com, and you can buy this as a one-shot single issue comic book. Jorge, please continue drawing comics.
God, yes, and send them to us.
Yes, send them to us as well. Our next comic. Do you have any other final words?
Oh no, I mean I'm gonna keep his name on my radar and look at his art for sure.
Yeah,
that's all.
We'll put links to all the comic books and the creators and stuff like that in the episode description, so you can kind of go and check them out. The next one that was submitted to us is Server. This was on Kickstarter, so this was kind of like submitted to us back in I think like September or something. This was successfully kickstarted in November, and it's the story of Server follows Chloe Williams, otherwise known as Ellipsis, who's an aspiring metal musician finishing up her last year of high school. She plays in a band with a group of misfit friends. and essentially one of their drummer has previously passed away, and suddenly one day is back in school. So it's kind of this supernatural teenage coming of age, let's put on let's get the band back together type story. It is written by Braiden Cox. The artist was Tim Sparvero. It's one of the proofreaders and editors was Chuck Pinell, who I think we reviewed one of his comic books previously.
We did
on an episode, and the editor was Katrina Rowitz, and as I mentioned, it was successfully kickstarted in November. So do you want to get off with your initial thoughts about this?
Chuck Pinell made Belial, I believe.
Yes, Belial, yes. Yeah.
So my intro comments are, I did enjoy reading the book. So my intro comments are going to be a little bit negative, but I very much enjoy reading the book. My biggest thing was, if on the credits you have written by, and then script edits by, and then a final proof editing, three different people, you're crediting with that, you shouldn't have so many errors and weird, confusing lines in your script. It's kind of, there's some moments that things are, I believe there's a couple misspellings, but it's mostly just phrased weirdly, so you need to reread it a couple times, or things just didn't come out how I think they were supposed to come out and be interpreted. But I did enjoy the story. I did like Tim Sparvero's art a lot. I think it's very stylized, and it works for this kind of story, like the coming of age style, kind of cartoony black and white. I enjoyed it a bit. I've got problems with this one though.
Yes, I would say I've got similar concerns about some of the writing, and I've got a few concerns about the artwork as well. Again, this is one of those ones where I enjoyed it, but I clearly kind of realized I'm not the target audience for this type of thing. So maybe I'm kind of missing out on something, and maybe that through that lens, I'm maybe giving it a slightly harder time than it deserves. Yeah, what did you kind of think about the first two or three pages where we're kind of introduced to the world of Sever?
We kind of get, I think it's actually Sever. It said Sever. Server somewhere in the email, which got me confused, but I'm pretty sure.
Oh, it is Sever. Yeah, it is Sever.
Yeah, because the email said server somewhere. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, so the intro shot is a woman, I think they're supposed to be in high school, escaping a mental facility. Mayhem is breaking down. It's like exploding, and there is a girl who we find out later is the deceased drummer, who her hand can kind of pop off, and she can switch hands, and they move on their own, and they pop back on. She's got like 4 hands floating around her. And that was weird. It's like a little prologue before you get into the main character work, and it makes a lot of sense after the fact. I did go back and be like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. But as a prologue, it was kind of strange.
Yeah.
I thought that the nurse running away would be a character because they gave her so much time on the page.
Yes.
But I don't believe she is. I did, though, really enjoy the art just from the get-go on this.
So the art style, should we maybe describe it? So it's somewhere between, how do you describe it? It's almost sort of like a Steven Universe. Steven Universe, but a little bit more realistic, maybe meets a little bit more realistic manga art style is how I would describe it. I don't know if that makes sense to you or not, Carl.
Yeah, it definitely looks like a cartoon kind of style to me, but just a little bit more realism. And something I do like a lot is there's a lot of ink on the page.
Yes.
There's a lot of black in the backgrounds. The backgrounds are fully illustrated most of the time. But there's a lot of ink on the page. And I actually haven't seen a lot of that lately. So I enjoyed that.
Well, and then we kind of like the first time we get introduced to Ellipsis, she's kind of like getting ready. She's late for school. She's getting, grabbing a guitar. So this is where one of my complaints about the art come in. It's fine when there's only 1 or 2 characters on the page and you can kind of differentiate them quite clearly. This is one of those comics where I wondered would have benefited from being colored. And I'm very much, I enjoy reading black and white comics. I think most of the time it's better to have them black and white than badly colored. But part of me wonders if this had been colored. This is a review copy, so maybe they did color it, decoloring later on. When there's a couple of characters on page, I was able to track who was speaking to who and what their relationship with other characters within the story was. When there's more than 3 or 4 of them on the page, I really struggle to tell the character designs apart. in certain sections, and trying to understand who's speaking to who, and what is that character, and why are they saying it to that. So that's that's one of my complaints about the art. And also it did occasionally looked a little bit kind of like flat. There's kind of not a lot of like depth to the image, which I think was a deliberate artistic choice, because I think it is kind of very much following kind of like a slice of life style of story. But yeah, so again, I think it did seem kind of like a little bit flat. Everything seemed to be kind of like on the same plane, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's not like, this isn't Jack Kirby dynamism. Even when there's action going on, like one of the girls punches another girl, and it is a bit flat, but it definitely still works with that cartoony kind of look.
Yeah.
Where you're not seeing like tons of shading or depth or anything, but you're getting the message, and it's consistent in its style.
Yeah.
A lot more of my problems came from the writing on this one.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about how you felt about the writing.
So I felt that I liked that the characters are kind of like the strong suit in this. I think the characters are all, for the most part, well written, especially kind of the three female protagonists in the band. I'm not going to spoil like the setup for the first band rehearsal, but I thought that was kind of quite an interesting way of getting out of school.
That was clever.
So I thought it, that was kind of like quite clever. And you go on, you talk a little bit more about what your reservations about the writing were.
So I brought this up before, and it's just it's a pet peeve. It's definitely nothing like that's too serious, but I don't get why people don't use contractions in scripts, because it makes people sound inhuman, and it happens a lot. I don't know why, because like if I read like two high school girls, and one just hops off the bus and the other one's like, "Oh my gosh, you are almost late for class," it just sounds weird and stilted, when just putting a simple contraction in there would have worked for me.
Yeah.
And that's not a huge deal, but that's just a little pet peeve. But I thought it was a little bit stiff in other regards and kind of direct. They're just kind of screaming at you in the beginning. These girls they're metal. They don't give a shit about their parents. Music is their life. Like, they're just like so hitting you over the head with the fact that these are kind of alternative girls. And I don't know. It's not for me, so I don't want to bag on it too hard, but it's seemed kind of overdone.
Yeah, now kind of looking back at the dialogue, some of it is a little bit. It's interesting you raised that, because they're reading through it. There was something that there were a few kind of sections that kind of made me cringe a little bit. That's kind of like a subconscious thing. I wasn't really, something wasn't quite working, but I thought it wasn't quite working because I wasn't the target audience for this type of story. So I was like, I've never been in a metal band. I've never been like a teenage girl, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I can kind of get where you're going from. I think the other issue I kind of maybe had with the writing was there's an awful lot of text on some of these pages, which can kind of make it hard to follow the conversation sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of speech bubbles that just kind of seep into other speech bubbles, and then you just are reading paragraphs per panel, and it's the conversations get a little long in the tooth.
Yeah, and repetitive and kind of like circular as well at some points. Yeah, I don't want to say we're ragging on it hard, but it's kind of like these are simple things that should have been sorted out in the edit, basically. So I kind of agree with you on that. Overall, though, I did find like the setup kind of quite intriguing. I always enjoy stories where a character has come back from the dead and how they deal with the world. I did have questions about kind of some of the logic in the story. This drummer has come back to life. So I was unclear whether the drummer was formerly a student at the school and they're being readmitted, or if this thing had happened, it would have been like kind of like a massive story, surely, that everyone in like the high school would have known about.
I think she went to that high school when she was alive.
Yes. So if she's kind of like suddenly turned up, I'm sure the headmaster would have realized who that was. So that's kind of the other thing I was like a bit confused about. I'm not too sure what's going on here. Yeah. Because she does go back to the high school, doesn't she?
Yeah, she gets like re-enrolled.
Yes.
I think just by her friends, which you can't do that.
Yes. I don't think you can.
But it's also using like cartoon logic, logic where so even like a band of kids can do whatever they want in that stuff. It's kind of like the Snowy Locks thing I accidentally brought up earlier, where like in that story the kids are basically treated as full grown adults for some of the actions that they take, and that's just kind of a cartoon thing.
Again, I think it's quite funny stories. I did enjoy some of the jokes. Overall, the artwork works well enough for me, but the thing that did intrigue me was kind of like the supernatural element. It's kind of seeing where that's going to be going next. This is a first issue in, I think, an ongoing series or a limited edition series, so it would be kind of interesting to see how they develop as creators going forward and how they kind of build in the different like character dynamics. I'm just looking at the last couple of pages, and there's like 5 characters gathered around like a cafeteria table, and I'm finding it really difficult to differentiate which character is speaking to whom. Different outfits might have helped, and maybe coloring would have been really useful,
or just like shading that, having one of them have dark hair and shading that in or something.
Kind of all the characters are kind of blonde, aren't they, basically?
I don't think there's any shaded in hair. It's definitely a style choice where they're, even if they have dark hair, I assume it's still going to come off as white on the page.
So or maybe this is going to be colored in at a later date. Have to check the Kickstarter details. So again, it's one of those flawed books. You can kind of see there's a lot to recommend it, but again, there's kind of a lot of work that needs to be done especially in terms of some of the writing and the pacing as well.
Yeah, and just because it feels like I'm ragging on it, I do want to throw out a couple of things I liked real quick.
Yeah.
The last few pages really show this off, and so I wanted to use them as an example. I'm not going to say what happens in them because we didn't get that far, and I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah.
But the last 2 or 3 pages, the use of ink and shading and just really the color black. There's only 2 colors, obviously. So the use of the color black in the ink was really, really sharp on those last couple pages, and I really liked some clever uses there. The character design, while kind of bland in spots, I like a lot of what's going on. I like the drummer. Is it Mary? What's her name? She has a really cool design. I like the X's for the eyes. You just kind of have to assume that no one else could see them in the actual comic because it would be a weird giveaway. But I like that as a character design, and I thought it was pretty well done overall. The whole time I was reading, I was like, it's not for me. And I feel a little too critical to be reviewing something that, even if done well, probably wouldn't be in my wheelhouse.
Yeah. The other thing I think the writing does actually do well is kind of going through the teenage coming of age sequences and the tone of the story that needs to be through to kind of like the more horror elements, and that blends really well in together. So a little bit like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where kind of like they mix those elements really well in together, and one never kind of feels jarring or out of place with the other, which I think is actually, as a writer, is kind of quite a tricky thing to pull off.
Yeah, definitely agree. There were some strong parts of this writing. I have to say, it definitely kept me compelled the whole time. Yeah. And I think they pulled off the oversized single issue format better than some people have. It's a 44-page issue. I think they're going to have 3, so I don't know if they're all going to be this length or if they're switching to regular size, but it's a little bit tricky to extend the single issue that long, but they pulled it off pretty well in terms of pacing. So
I think there's just a few technical things they need to address in terms of like the dialogue, and I read this all in one go. I wasn't, I enjoyed it a lot. So we'll put the Kickstarter link in that. I'm not too sure how Kickstarter works in terms of once the Kickstarter is finished, if you can still buy through Kickstarter, but I'm assuming that is the case. So I'll put the Kickstarter link in there. Anyway, I'm sure they're going to be doing another Kickstarter for issues 2 and 3 as well.
Awesome, man.
Cool. All right.
If you guys have any comics you'd like us to read, your own comics or just stuff you really love, send them over to either Fahed on the Facebook is doing really good with that. Even the Instagram, See-Through Panel, or seethroughpanel@gmail.com. That's all of our places you can talk to us. Yeah, check out the tip jar as well, because I've been forgetting to plug that at the end.
Yeah.
That's really appreciated.
Yeah, that does help us keep the lights on. And also, if you want to start your own podcast, there's like an affiliate link in the episode description. You get like 30% off, and that also kind of kicks us a little bit money as well. I'm not too sure what we're going to be doing next, but we'll let you guys know over social media. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
So I can see it. Bye.